I'm staying behind the pulpit today because I want to keep sharply focused on the comments that I make that ultimately end up tying in with the gospel. What have been your thoughts and feelings this past week since the grand jury decision? Understandably, some say, gee, really haven't thought about it much at all, just taking care of one's own daily life. Others will say, again, understandably, wanting to move quickly beyond all this and get back to some sort of normalcy. At the same time, other black, brown, and white members of our community, including police officers, are discouraged, disillusioned, angry, sad, some even in agony. Even in the report today, if you see in the Beacon Journal, talking about a number of those police officers and how they felt awful for what happened, even though they felt they made a timely decision. There are very different perspectives on what happened on that night when Jayland Walker died. And some would say, again, with the legitimacy, hey, the grand jury has spoken, let's get on with it, move on from the conversation. Others, especially people of color, have told me that whether the police used excessive force or not, used it or maybe didn't, that this is still just another reminder of how too many blacks have been put down, even killed, recently and through the years because of racist attitudes. We know that there have been many peaceful protests in various cities, including our own. Unfortunately, some have resorted to violence, even here. And I have heard some people say, see all those blacks, all they want to do is cause destruction. Several of my black friends have said how hurtful this is, and to let white people know that the media tends to focus on the destruction, but the reality is almost everybody is protesting, and you see this because I was with a prayer group earlier in the week. Almost everybody is peaceful and is nonviolent and espouses that, even the families who lose loved ones. So to say they're all like that, obviously, we need to look at that when we do it or others. Also, we know that many people have commented about police officers, and you get this generalization. Oh, police officers, they're just motivated by wanting to hurt people, even shoot them. Here again, there are very few like that. I know many of the police officers here. What do they want to do? Why are they in it? Even still in it is to protect people, to bring peace, to help communities. Now, even the police that I know have said, hey, there's probably a need for better training in dealing with these difficult situations we keep coming upon. But they're not there looking to see who can I put down. So almost everyone agrees that specific actions need to be taken by all of us to improve the ways we prevent and deal with any forms of injustice against anyone for any reason. You may want to consider being involved in citizen groups that are looking at this. They're mentioned in the Beacon Journal too, as positive steps of bringing people together to how can we strengthen our community in many ways and foster greater understanding. And we know too that in our own parish, we've told you about this, want to mention more, we have a parish outreach which began as a pilot black-white dialogue 9 months ago, to have heart-to-heart conversations, to hear one another's stories, to better understand each other, to come to a genuine love for one another. Here, it's a pilot group, but you'll hear more information over the next couple weeks in the bulletin, that we want to move. The next step with that group was, let's see what we can do, what ideas that we can put forth there to bring more people together, even in the wider community. Again, with a major commitment, hey, let's get to know one another and understand one another. And even where there's differences, may those differences be through love. Mention them. Well, also, the last week, there's been a number of community gatherings. Several people of different color and backgrounds have shared with how deeply they are hurt and frustrated. Many are. And this particular group I'm talking about, each one was a Christian and is looking to faith, not for a glib answer, but an inner strength and guidance. Interestingly enough, because a couple of them were Catholic, I talked with them about the gospel that we heard today. I knew I was going to be reflecting on it. Luke, the gospel writer, describes this story we just heard, the disciples on the road to Emmaus, not only to give us some interesting information about Jesus and his appearance on Easter Day, but all the gospel writers, we mentioned this before, and this one specifically, the gospel writers want believers then and us now to recognize something of our own faith journey in this event and what the Lord might be saying to us, as he said to them. The disciples on the road to Emmaus were disheartened. They wanted to get away from the heartache, the disappointment, the loss. The reality for them at that moment in time, Jesus is dead. It's over. They were crushed, grieving the loss of their own hopes and dreams. They had been excited about his vision on how to live and how to love. They were inspired by him. Now, they were simply disillusioned. A part of them died on the cross. And again, as we look at any of us, of our experiences, can we relate? There's probably been hurt and pain in our lives as there is even here and now. And in the midst of that, can we say, oh God, somehow, some way, you're here. Help me to believe that and live out of your love. We've all had hurt and pain in our personal lives. Here in that gospel, again, mindful for us, Jesus joined these disciples in their journey. He came to them as he comes to us in their sadness, focusing on the loss. Understandably, they didn't recognize him. Sometimes when we're in great grief, God, we can't see you. But here too, it would be too much for them to believe that he really was alive. Wow. And what did Jesus do? He walked with them. He didn't just tell them everything all at once. He walked with them and he listened to them. He asked, what are you discussing along the way? You know, we don't maybe think about this enough. Prayer often begins by the Lord asking us, as he asked those disciples, what's going on with you? How are you feeling? How can I help? How can you make a difference? Jesus asked their story. He asks us to share his story with them. And I remember one man, Catholic, who was really moved by this understanding because he basically said his whole life, his prayer was saying memorized prayers as a Catholic growing up. Is that important? Yeah, that kind of prayer. But what he came to realize in a faith context is, in addition to that, very important, is that we can talk to Jesus in an ordinary way as a friend. We can share our feelings. Some people say, oh, if I'm hurt or angry or upset, I don't talk to God about it. He doesn't want to hear that. Yes, he does. He wants to know where we are. He wants us to express our feelings, and he wants to try to help us work through them. That's the Lord that's in the midst of our everyday human circumstances. With the disciples in this reading today, they were reminded again of their faith tradition, their Jewish faith tradition. Jesus reframed for them and for us a different perception of death and loss. And for them in their brokenness, and maybe sometimes for us in our brokenness, to be open to the Lord, to realize, I've looked everywhere else, I need to look to you. And believe what I hear every week, that you're there. And again, with the disciples, he said, was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things, enter into glory, and that he would be raised up? Jesus gave them through a hopelessness a hopeful perspective. His own life showed them and wants to show us that rejection, hate, any kind of prejudice, suffering, evil, do not have the final say. Goodness does, mercy does, love does, God does. Can we dare to believe that here and every day in our life? One quick example, One black woman shared with me this past week that she was grateful that her son, who had been hostile in his teenage years and had hatred toward almost anyone white, and she was always trying to share her faith with him and help him understand what he was going through, but believe that there's a presence that could heal him of that violence and hatred. Because violence begets violence, hatred begets hatred. And what she shared with me, it happened. That just recently, her son, who is now in his 20s, came back to his mom and said, "Mom, now I get it. I see your faith. And in your faith, you were telling me, and now I'm that way too. Not to be hateful, not to be violent, to learn how to love and forgive." And as he said, still to have a great sense of purpose if he's upset, to have an inner strength and an outer courage to speak up for justice. Not with some violence, but in ways that, again, foster mutual understanding. And so he saw his call was to turn his negativity and hostility, which he did, toward believing a positive difference could be made. He could not do everything, but he could at least do something. What about us, wherever we are in all of this? Not only in these main societal issues that are complicated and tough to deal with, but our personal lives, our families, our other situations. All of us, black, white, whatever our background, ethnicity, are called to do our part to help our community and world become more like how our loving God created us to be. Wow, we have to do that as followers of Jesus, beginning with our own thoughts and attitudes. So take a quiet moment. We pray for ourselves, that ongoing conversion. We pray for our community. We pray that somehow, in some way, all people may see, as we heard in the reading today, that Jesus is the path of life, not the path of hate or the path of destruction, but the path of life, that we might believe and follow that life and live in and share his love. Take that quiet moment.